When I was campus minister at UC Berkeley, I was part of a committee that was planning a university-wide leadership seminar weekend event. And I was just one person on the committee. It wasn't because I was chaplain or anything else. I just volunteered. And we were doing one of these icebreakers, where, because it was a new committee and everybody needed to get to know one another. And it was called Mild or Spicy, and the theory was that you would get 2 minutes to answer questions from anybody in the room. It was sort of free form. And the questions could be mild, like, what's your favorite color? Or, as you might imagine among college students, spicy. You can take that where you want. And so I was the last one to do this in a room full of about 20 kids. It had begun on my right, and it came around, and I was the last one. And by the time they got to me, I only had about 30 seconds before we were going to run way off schedule. So I said spicy, which of course threw them all for a loop. They didn't have a clue how to ask a priest a spicy question. And so finally, one student said, well, why are you in this religion business anyway? And I joked, and I said, well, you want me to answer that in 30 seconds? And I said, oh, well, it's the best way I know I've found to make meaning. That for me, religion is a meaning-making enterprise. And so we do so much in life that does help us make meaning, make sense out of what goes on, to provide a conceptual or an emotional structure, not framework, from which we can encounter the world, encounter the problems of the world, encounter the joys of the world. And so it's, what is it that helps us create meaning? And liturgy, worship, is one of those things. It gives some context. The ritual certainly does that. By saying, okay, this is what's important. We're going to start here. There's a movement to the way that the liturgy functions. It will hit 1 or 2 crescendos, and then we'll tail off, and you'll leave. And that structure helps remind us that that's the way that life goes. Is that life isn't one a constant uphill journey, nor is it a constant downhill journey, but it's filled with peaks and valleys. There are times when we will pay attention. There are times when material things will speak to us. And so it situates us. Ritual situates us in a way that we can reflect on what's going on in the world. And it provides a context for bringing things in to say, how am I going to understand this event, this news that I've received, this disturbing book that I've read? How am I going to understand that? And sometimes worship or the liturgy will help us make that kind of meaning. So, words make meaning. Certainly, that's the easiest way to think about it. Or we can say that we make meaning into words. I'm not going to go into that theoretical quagmire. But actions make meaning. What does it mean to bow? Most people in the United States do not bow for hardly anything. Even when they meet a dignitary, they might not bow. Yet in worship, we bow. We may make a profound bow. It may just be a tilt of the head. Some people may get down on a knee in a genuflection. That action means something. It means that we are giving honor, or we recognize our own position of subservience, or something like that. So our actions mean something. Even walking up to receive communion, rather than sitting in a pew and having it pass by you on trays with little cups, the action of getting up and walking means something. It means something to you. It means something to the people who see you do it. Receiving bread and wine from somebody means something. You are a recipient rather than just taking something, again, out of a tray. I don't mean to caricaturize that, but it's a different meaning. When we moved the presider from facing the same direction as the congregation against the wall to turning the presider around so the presider is facing the congregation, just that movement, that action means something. And so all of these ways, actions, words, the architecture means something. I had a professor, and you've probably heard this before, Professor Lewis Weil, argues, the building always wins. You can do anything that you want, but the building will beat you. And so if you want to have one particular kind of worship and the building doesn't support that, that's a problem. So if you think about most of our churches, they reflect a hierarchical way of thinking about the church. You've got the experts up front, everybody else is there to be instructed. It's almost an academic way of thinking about things. You think about first grade, bolted down desks, everybody's facing front and the teacher. That's changed. We haven't changed much of our church architecture. Sometimes it has been. But if you want to do certain things, like do liturgical dance or antiphonal reading or something like that, if your pews are bolted down all facing front, it's very difficult to do that. So the building will win. So, and it says something. It says something. The building says something, and therefore imposes its own meaning structure on us. And we can rebel against that, or we can incorporate it, or we can just say, okay, I understand what it's doing. It's not part of who I am. But what do other things that we use? What do they mean? In worship, what does the water really mean? Is there a difference between sprinkling and full immersion in terms of baptism? Those things provide a different or suggest a different kind of meaning about what's going on. What does bread and wine mean? It means different things in different places, and some cultures have made substitutes for those because bread and wine have no meaning in their culture. So when we think about worship and we think about liturgy, we've got to think about what it is that means stuff, not only to us but to the congregation, and be intentional about considering what that meaning is. Do we really want to suggest meaning by the things that we do, the things that we use, that run counter to some of the other things that we might want to say? Referring back to the flags, how you move the flags suggests meaning. Now, do we want flags in the church? What does that say? It's a different way of thinking about meaning. So liturgy of worship is a meaning-making exercise, but how are we going to go about it? What meaning do we want to make?